This is going to be an unusual topic because I don't normally get info like this, but now that it's come to my attention, I feel like it'd be important to open up about it. A friend of mine got in contact with one of the developers from Rockstar Vienna about Manhunt 2, the development process, and what all happened to it. So, I'm going to go over the email shared with me and the relevant information within it. Bear in mind, this is going to be very much a trust me dude sort of circumstance. I can't directly show the email, though I can verify it's legitimate. And I should mention that this is not some invitation to incur controversy on Rockstar. The people making the choices here are long gone, and at this point, the entire studio has moved on from making games like Manhunt to working on GTA 6. Plus, we're also working from the perspective of one developer, so we don't know the full story of what happened to Rockstar Vienna. This just gives us useful insights. It's sort of like how Walt Williams and the other guy from that Reddit AMA had different perspectives on some aspects of Spec Ops, though they generally had a similar story to tell. With that in mind, let's go right from the top. So, Rockstar Vienna, according to this developer, was shut down within a week. The real reasons were never told about why the shutdown happened. Rumors flied around. This guy's theory was that it was a corporate decision by Take-Two, as a power move to force Rockstar Games to save money. Take-Two knew how important Rockstar was for them, so they didn't want Rockstar to get too much influence and too much control. Rockstar Vienna was kind of the odd man out, since they were a non-English speaking country, and they didn't really have a serious license. They handled ports, and Manhunt 2 was their biggest project to date. There were just other issues going on as well that made closing the studio kind of a no-brainer from that perspective. According to the developer, Manhunt 2 was about a handful of months from being finished, and ended up basically being collateral damage. It's unclear if that meant the game needed just a few months of polish and then it would have been ready to ship, or if it needed a few months of work to have, say, a 0.01 build ready. The development of Manhunt 2 was messy, which we knew, but this confirms it. The original plan was to have Rockstar North, the developers of Manhunt 1, write the story and let Rockstar Vienna do the development. It took Rockstar North about 2 years to address the story, and that put Rockstar Vienna into a pickle, more or less, since they didn't know whether their levels would fit into whatever Rockstar North came up with. They had some tentative ideas on what the story would be: fighting a religious cult, having everything playing out as the hysteria of the main protagonist. Those were ideas Rockstar Vienna dabbled with, but the management didn't want to put Rockstar North on the spot. At one point, they had enemies as slim guys with TVs as heads, which seems like a callback to the Cam Heads, which were a cut faction of Manhunt 1 that have some concept art you can find. Rockstar Vienna's management is a story of its own. It was too afraid to upset the Rockstar North guys, and that caused a lot of friction between the factions within the development team. There were a lot of decisions being made outside of their control, whether it was in Rockstar New York, Rockstar North, or Take-Two. The project was undergoing a lot of delays. It started in 2003, so pretty much right after the release of the original Manhunt. Being a sequel to an existing game with the same tech on the same platform, the idea was that it was going to be a walk in the park. But at the start of 2005, about a year and a half into development, they didn't even have any game levels built. They still dabbled with a vertical slice, which is a good sign that they weren't really sure how to approach the situation. There was a lot of static going on, and a lot of different directions that felt like they were being pulled in. Apparently, this is one of the more shocking points, there wasn't much in the way of a different plot point to what ended up in the final game. This developer played the released versions on some occasions, and as far As the developer could tell, hardly anything had changed. The developer would go so far as to say it's merely a visual downgrade from what they had developed. Which is a pity because they had fun making the levels look good, but it was understandable since Rockstar London had to work with what they received without a lot of documentation. And plus, they had to change the render engine since Renderware was bought by EA, which meant one of their biggest competitors knew what projects they worked on. To the developer, the real tragedy was that this could have been a great-looking game. The artists had internal competitions on who could come up with the craziest workarounds to impress the other artists. As an example, this developer created a hospital bed without using any textures, and another artist went mental not understanding why it looked so good. The PS2 was a fun console to develop for. There were a lot of awkward requirements, which meant that people had to come up with ingenious ideas on how to do art. I mean, look at the Time Splitters games on examples of creating great art styles with limited hardware. This developer's favorite thing was that all the lighting was purely done with vertex colors. The PS2 never had any calculated lighting whatsoever for the level, only for the characters and objects. It was all pre-calculated into the geometry. The shadows were cut into the geometry and darkened via a custom scripting solution. Furthermore, the shadow locations were set by the game designers, as hiding in shadows is a game mechanic. The job of the artist was to make these look plausible. And sometimes the game designers didn't care whether the shadow zone would make any physical sense. It was a challenge, but it was a fun one. The developer really liked doing that, and it showed. They got some praise by other artists for the lighting efforts. One colleague said one level looked like a horrible mess before lighting was added, and still thinks occasionally about how to solve that nowadays. That's some of what the developer remembers. On the day the studio closed, all the developers got drunk around 10, and it was just kind of a fiasco. Some bridges were burnt, and some issues were raised, but the developer regretted nothing in the end. And I think that's noble. From my perspective, at least. So breaking all this down, this covers some aspects of what we know about the game's development. We know that it got downgraded to fit the PSP, which was the weakest system available. We know that Rockstar Vienna was closed abruptly, and they didn't even really get credited for Manhunt 2, despite having a lot of work done for it. We know Rockstar London basically had to put together a story and game from what Rockstar North and Rockstar Vienna had come up with. I do love the final version of Manhunt 2, but it's crazy to think about what all was changed. And on that note, what shocked me was that there weren't any different plot points. At least that's what this developer claimed. Now, I don't know if that means that the game would have gone on longer in, like, the Vienna cut, say. There would have been 20 levels, and it would have just expanded the story beyond the final game 16. Or if it meant that it really was just beat for beat the same story, only with some differences and set pieces and weapons and things of that sort. It sounds like they were building different set pieces and just trying to make them fit the situation. It would explain some of the strange choices for how the game's mapped out. Like, the cut from broadcast interrupted to altered state is weird. Altered state is justified as being a set for the 5 past high noon show, but it's kind of just a farm out in the middle of nowhere, and the connection to the TV studio is loosely established. It could be that Altered State was just being worked on without any context, and later on they added like the props and the lighting and stuff to give the impression, oh yeah, this is a set for a TV show, a western. And if not much had changed in the plot, then did that mean Leo was always meant to be a figment of Danny's imagination? was that idea of mine about the twist being that Leo was once real, but Danny knows that he was implanted in his head from the start. Was that the case? Or is this a case of miscommunication? Were there different plot points in some areas that he didn't catch on to? It isn't clear, but this goes into a decent amount of depth and it shines light on things that we either didn't know before or we only had inklings of. Like the religious cult one, we know that there was a pitch where a man was getting voices in his head telling him to kill in the name of God. We know about the hysterical main protagonist idea, where Frisbee, a puppet, was manipulating him into killing people. And it sounds like those were pitches by Vienna, but Rockstar North was the one who came up with the MK Ultra connections and the Pikmin project and everything like that. And it sounded like Rockstar Vienna was coming up with levels while Rockstar North hammered out the story. It seems like there were just a lot of communication issues between the different Rockstar studios. There's no real core faction to blame, I would say. It's a mess all around. And it sounds like they did their best with what they had. Same goes for Rockstar London. They were handed a project abruptly, and they collaborated with other Rockstar studios to get it done. And I really enjoyed that product. But it does leave me wondering what the status of a Vienna-era build is. It sounds like it was close to being done. I don't know if that means it was close to being ready to ship, or close to having a playable version. The developer did not mention if there were any test builds out there, if they had shipped out any playable builds, if there is a 0.01 PS2 or Xbox build, or what that would be labeled as, since the Manhunt leaked build was version 0.67 or 0.69, depending on which screen you see. The news is simultaneously hopeful and a letdown. Because at face value, it means a lot of these theories, like like Leo being an IAA agent, or all the theories about Leo's release therapy dialogue to Danny, or the idea of Dr. White being a villain, or Leo being a real person, or Frisbee having some role. If we take this at face value, none of that's true. It was basically just the final game, but with some different set pieces and things of that sort. There are some I've learned about, like in Altered State, there being a scene where there was going to be a helicopter trying to poison Danny, and he would have to hide in a wheat field to avoid detection. But I don't know. I think this gives us a lot of perspective on the development of it, but I think for the finer story elements, we would need to talk to people who work on the plot, or we would need the build itself, because it seems like a lot of the story was handled by Rockstar North. They could be a good lead on this, but Rockstar Vienna would know a lot about the technical know-how, which this email indicates. And it does shine a light on the PS2 era development, all the tips and tricks they used. I find that really informative, and it's cool to know when it started, how much progress was made, and overall, I'm glad we got this, even if it can be a bit disappointing to know that some of the out there theories aren't necessarily the case. Or maybe they will, and with further context we'll learn everything. So, that was me trying to shine a light on this very unexpected but fascinating development. I'm going to have to rework aspects of that Vienna-era plot treatment with this news in mind. Not sure what I'll do, though, because it did hinge on Leo being a real person, and now I'm completely questioning that. Still, though, thanks for watching, and thanks for tuning in. Hope you guys have a great day, and take care.